Hello, my name is Mark Gibson, and you're listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost series, a weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Ruth Hennessy, Catchment Manager with the Local Authority Water Programme, also known as LAWPRO, who will be speaking to us today about protecting natural waters through catchment management. Ruth, you're very welcome to our webinar this morning.
Thank you very much, Mark, and I'm delighted and honoured to be invited to be here.
And Pat, we're also joined by Pat Murphy, who is the head of the Teagasc Environment Knowledge Transfer Programme. Pat, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Mark. Great.
So, Ruth, could you give us a little bit of background on yourself? The Local Authority Waters Programme. It's a relatively new programme. Is that right?
It is, yeah. I suppose we were established in 2018 following the publication of the River Basin Management Plan, and I suppose I'll go through that later on in the presentation. But yes, we're a relatively new organisation, and we've two teams: the catchment assessment team, catchment scientists, and also the communities team. So
great.
There's a team of about 60 of us altogether.
Okay, great. Well, you'll be going into more detail in your presentation in a moment. So if I could ask you to share your screen with us, and we will hear your presentation. And a reminder to everybody, if you have a question that you'd like me or Pat to put to Ruth afterwards, or a point that you'd like to make, please do use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will put those questions to Ruth at the end of the presentation. So Ruth, I'll hand over to you, and we'll talk to you after the presentation.
So yes, as Mark said, my name is Ruth Hennessy. I'm the Catchments Manager and I'm based here in the Southeast region with the Local Authority Waters Programme. And I suppose my role here is I'm leading a team of catchment scientists, and we're looking looking in detail, I suppose, at the areas that have been prioritised in the Southeast for the second cycle of the River Basin Management Plan. And I'm going to talk about that and go through it in a little bit more detail as we go through the presentation. So I suppose my own personal background, I'm an environmental scientist, and I've worked primarily in the areas of pollution control, largely with local authorities and also industry over the last 20 years. So I suppose I'm very familiar with the area and the kind of industry and the pressures and that we have. So this slide here, I suppose it needs no introduction really to the audience that's here this morning, I'm sure. And I'm sure you've seen it before, or if not this, other versions of it. And Jenny Deacon from the Environmental Protection Agency Catchments Unit would have spoken a couple of weeks ago at this series about the water quality trends that we're experiencing in Ireland. So I won't spend too long here, but I suppose I just want to maybe set the scene just at the start of my talk. I think it's just maybe an important reminder for us always. I suppose, as we know, water quality isn't where it needs to be. Only 52.8% of all of our surface waters are at good or better ecological status, where they need to be. So, that's and I suppose that number continues to decline. Rivers in particular, only 53% of rivers are at good status, at good or high status. And this again, is a drop again on previous years. Lakes while they have improved, they're still only at 50% at good or better status. And estuaries, I suppose, are in the worst condition of all, with only 38% at good or better status. So I suppose across all of those surface waters, one of the worrying trends that we're seeing is the increasing concentrations or increasing levels of nutrients, and by and large it's the nutrients that are I suppose driving and resulting in those poor status results and those less than good status results. I suppose within that overall picture, there's quite a few stories that could be told. I suppose one of the main ones, I suppose, is around high status. So these are the pristine, very high standard, high quality sites, the ones that are generally unimpacted by anthropogenic activities, and these are continuing to decline, and that is it's a worrying trend. These are important. I suppose they're reference sites. They're important reservoirs of biodiversity as well, and they're important to to help, I suppose, re-establish good status in downstream areas as well. It's important that we have these high status areas and the diversity that exists within them. At the other end of the scale, I suppose fortunately we don't have too many bad status sites, although I did notice in the last cycle reporting that there was a couple of additional new sites gone in there into that bad status category. But it's the poor status ones that, again, the trend there is showing that they're continuing to increase. And moderate as well is, it's I suppose going up rather than going down. So, those trends they all need to be addressed. And I suppose these are occurring despite, a lot of increased regulation, and everybody here would be familiar with the increased regulation that has I suppose, come into place in the last 10, 15, and 20 years. Such as the Nitrates Action Programme, the Good Agricultural Practice regulations, and also, I suppose, wastewater and point sources are highly regulated now by either local authorities or in the larger industries and facilities are all licensed generally by the Environmental Protection Agency. And I suppose it's also worth noting and reminding ourselves that there has been a lot of investment too in environmental protection measures and infrastructure between at farm scale and farm level, but also on infrastructure. But despite all of that, it still isn't enough to address these trends and to reverse them. So a different approach really is needed, and we need to do more than what we have been doing for the last number of years. So the River Basin Management Plan is Ireland's strategy to deal with water quality improvement, and it's a requirement of the Water Framework Directive. And the Water Framework Directive, it's a European legislation that I suppose requires all member states to protect and restore water to good and high status where it is. So this plan, published in 2018, it set out that new approach, and it introduced and provided for the establishment of our office, the Local Authority Waters Programme, and also for the Agricultural Sustainability Support and Advice Programme, which is a joint programme and consists of a team of 30 agricultural advisors, sustainability advisors, and it's a joint enterprise with Teagasc and the dairy industries. I think it's worth noting really that this is a unique collaboration, I suppose, between Teagasc, the advisory services, and also the dairy industry and the public sector. So I think it's a very important partnership approach. There's great opportunities for knowledge sharing and understanding, and the model is very much one of partnership. And I suppose, in my own opinion, I think it is critical to securing water quality improvements. That this kind of network and this kind of close cooperation and collaboration is critical to ensure we bring about the kind of change that we need, and I suppose that everybody understands and everybody is delivering the same messages. I know that Noel Meehan and Joe Crockett are going to be here at this series next week to tell us a little bit more about that, about the ASAP programme. I suppose I'm not going to delay too long here, but I suppose it is just worth mentioning that I suppose today I'm talking specifically about the work of the Local Authority Waters Programme and what we're doing to restore water quality in areas that are, I suppose, have been impacted. But that's just one of the measures that's detailed in the River Basin Management Plan. And I suppose there are many others in that plan as well that set out and detail how Ireland continues to protect water quality. So not least, the regulations around domestic wastewater treatment, inspections and grants, also the Nitrates Action Programme and the Good Agricultural Practice regulations, as well as licensing of discharges, point sources, the capital investment programmes there by Irish Water. Those are all measures to protect and improve also water quality. Forestry schemes and others, they're all there, and they're detailed in the River Basin Management Plan. So back to the Local Authority Waters Programme there, and to our office. As I said, it's a local authority shared service. It was established in 2018 following the publication of the River Basin Management Plan, and it consists, as I said, of two teams: the local authority, the catchments assessment team, which is the team that I'm part of, and also the communities team. Altogether, there's around 60 of us. This chart here actually needs to be updated. I can see the blue dot scientist is missing from the catchment scientist team, and also we've 13 community water officers now. So local authorities are I suppose, have been assigned the responsibility in the legislation for coordinating and implementing the river basin, coordinating the implementation of the river basin management plan. And I suppose it's that task is achieved collectively by the Local Authority Waters Programme on behalf of all of the local authorities across the country. So we're very much working on their behalf. So that coordination is achieved largely through 5 regional committees across the country. The regional operational committees, that structure, it's chaired by the local authorities, but it's also at operational level, it's made up of representatives of all of the public, the relevant public and implementing bodies in the region. So this slide here, it's an example of all of the agencies who are members of those regional operational committees. This one here is from the southeast. It's not an exclusive list here, and as I'm looking at it, I'm hoping I haven't missed anybody obvious from it. But it's very much, I suppose, at the heart of the work that we're doing, and it's a very important network, and it's a platform for sharing information and also for reviewing progress on implementation in priority areas, but also the work of the community water officers across the whole of the region as well. Is very much draws on the resources and the knowledge base from these agencies, and it very much, I suppose, builds on the saying or relies on, typifies this really. Níl art Carla Kayla, that there's great strength in unity, and working together we can achieve so much more. So as I said, the communities team, that there's the 2 teams, the communities team and the catchment scientists. And we're spread across the whole country, and that map actually shows the location of the offices across the country. So just to talk maybe just for a couple of minutes about the communities team and the work that they do. I suppose they work with communities on water related projects, and I suppose they work with communities at any level on any type of project really that community are interested in delivering. I suppose they work to build capacity within groups as well, so that that they can develop and take on larger projects as well as time goes on. So here, I suppose one of the examples as well of one of the initiatives that the communities team and the funding office have developed is a prize in the Tidy Towns competition, and this is jointly sponsored by Inland Fisheries and Waterways Ireland. I think actually this is on pause for this year, but it will come back again. I think it's a victim of COVID. And I suppose Tidy Towns groups, along with angling groups, are probably some of the most active community groups across the country. And they're a great resource and a great network. And they're also very, I suppose, conscientious and ambitious as well, and have great ideas and great energy. The pictures at the bottom there, I suppose, taken from some of the projects or some of the events that the community water officer in the southeast, Anne Phelan, has been involved in. The one there on the left is a biodiversity talk in the Anne Valley in Waterford during Heritage Week last year. The one in the middle there is a project that Fran Igo, my colleague here in LAWPRO, has been working on with Waterford County Council, with Paul Carroll in Waterford County Council, and it's a captive breeding programme, or an assisted breeding programme for the freshwater pearl mussel in the Clodia River in Portlaw in County Waterford. On the right there then is some volunteers in the Johns River in Waterford, litter picking, and these are angling and kayakers who are in the river on a Saturday morning picking litter out. So other projects and other things that the communities team have going on during COVID, they ran a Stories from the Waterside competition, again asking people to share their stories and share their memories of their local river. The theme there was If These Waters Could Talk. So I think the judging of this is nearly complete actually. I'm looking forward to seeing to reading the stories that have been submitted and the prize winning ones. And also the communities team have worked with Leader on developing guidance for community groups on projects, on developing projects, ideas for projects, but also on guidance on navigating their way through those funding programs that are there. Leader is a very significant funding program that community groups can access to help them deliver projects. And this guidance, it helps them to specifically access money that can be used for environmental works, not just environment, but also biodiversity. The community fund, the community water fund, is a development fund, is another major element of the communities team, and it's a relatively small fund, but it's used to support communities in water related projects and initiatives. This is an example of details, I suppose, of the applications that were received in the 2020 call for funding, which was earlier this year. I suppose, as you can see there, the largest number of them of projects relate to kind of awareness and education type projects. But there is a very wide range of projects there and of initiatives from people looking for funding, from those awareness and education, but also ecological surveys, habitat enhancement works as well, in-stream, also some citizen science projects there as well. So the range of, I suppose, of work and engagements that the communities team have, it is very diverse. And I suppose they very much will respond to the type of community that they're dealing with, and also, I suppose, their own capacity and ability, and then working with them as well to maybe build that capacity as time goes on. So back then to the catchment assessment team and to the team that I work with primarily. And I suppose, as I said, we are focused on the 190 areas, these 190 prioritized areas for action. I trick myself up with the acronyms sometimes. These are the areas that have been selected in this cycle of the River Basin Management Plan. They're detailed in the River Basin, in that plan, that 2018 to 2021 plan. And these are the areas that we're working in and focused on. I suppose these areas were selected by the local authority-led regional structures that I spoke about earlier, and they were selected for that plan, and they were selected following, I suppose, on the basis or in the following consideration of the EPA scientific analysis, the analysis work that they would have done on these areas and about the areas that are, I suppose, at risk of not meeting the water framework directive standards. And they were also selected using, I suppose, considering other principles such as I suppose, protecting and restoring high status protected areas. Also was I suppose a consideration as well to start in headwaters first, start in the upstream areas. There's no point, I suppose, starting in the estuary. And also another consideration was building on existing work and programs that were already in place. So as I said, altogether there's 190 of these across the country, and that overall it's 726 water bodies. Also, I suppose, from that initial analysis done by the Environmental Protection Agency, we know that agriculture has been identified as a significant pressure in about 359 of these. But most of these water bodies will have multiple stressors or multiple activities that are putting pressure on water quality in these areas. So what do we do then, the Local Authority Waters Programme, and what do our assessments look like? I suppose what we call the process that we do and the assessment that we do, we call it local catchment assessment. And I suppose the next series of slides I'm going to take you through that process, what it looks like, and the various elements and stages in it. It starts with a desk study here on the right-hand side of that circle. You can see that it starts with a desk study, and the desk study, it allows the catchment scientist to develop a conceptual understanding of the catchment based on the principle of source pathway receptor. I suppose the next stage of the process is a community meeting, and it's a very important element of the process as well, and it's an opportunity to share information and to share our understanding of what's going on in the catchment with community stakeholders, and also to learn a little bit more about what might be going on in a particular catchment. Very often there would be very interesting insights can be gathered at those community meetings. So then we start with field work. We gather evidence to confirm, I suppose, where the river is impacted and how significantly it's impacted as well. I suppose this allows us then to develop and design measures with various pressure rollers. Where we identify that agriculture is the significant pressure, the agricultural advisors from the ASAP team will visit the farmers, do a detailed farm assessment and identify the measures that are needed to be implemented, that need to be implemented on that farm, on that particular location. I suppose generally this process is maybe quite linear, as I'm suggesting here, and in these agricultural catchments particularly, we would work very closely with the ASAP advisor from very early on in the process, and the ASAP advisor would be involved really and I suppose in developing their understanding as well of the catchment from the very beginning at the desk study stage, and they will be involved with the community meeting as well. So by the time we get to complete field work and get to the stage where we're identifying and agreeing on measures, both the catchment scientist and the advisor have been working closely together and have both a clear understanding of the story and the particular issues that are going on in the catchment. So the first stage of that desk study then, the desk study is the first piece of work that we do, is we have to, I suppose, pull together all of the pieces of information that exist and are available about the area that we're working in and about the priority area. So for most of these water bodies in priority areas, there's already a lot of information. The Water Framework Directive monitoring programme is quite extensive, and the data that's gathered from that is our first stop. So this is the receptor information effectively. The biological monitoring data, so this is the Q scores, this is key to status determination. And I suppose many of these sites will also have chemistry information, which, and these are the elements that support status and are necessary to support, good ecological status. So things like nutrient levels, also oxygen levels, indicators of organic pollution as well, BOD and things like that. So these, so we can look and see then what environmental quality standards are breached, how far, I suppose, what are the trends like, how far are those concentrations that we're seeing, how far are they from the thresholds, what level of reduction and improvement is needed in each of these areas. It's important also, I suppose, to look at the catchments as a whole, and particularly when we know that the problem is driven by nutrients. So this example here, it's the work of one of my colleagues, Owen McAleer, and here I'm not quite sure, I don't know how clear it is there, but here I suppose what Owen is looking at is nitrate, and he's looking at the entire sub-catchment. So the river is flowing from the south and it's flowing northeast there. But he's following, I suppose, the concentrations of nitrate, and can see that, as you're moving from one water body down to the next, and by the time you get to the last one, the concentrations of nitrate increase throughout. But then, I suppose, looking at it in a little bit more detail and looking at the relative contribution of each of the individual water bodies, you can see that which ones are contributing most and contributing the largest load. So this, I suppose, allows us to identify, I suppose, almost like the nutrient excess and the nutrient balance for each of these areas, and it allows us to target the measures and identify what exactly is needed and what level of reduction is needed in each of the areas. The next part of that process of developing of that source pathway receptor, I suppose, continuum is looking at the pathways. And it is an essential part of the understanding of what's going on. And it's about, I suppose, understanding how water flows within a catchment. And I suppose, as we know from previous speakers, the two nutrients that are of largest concern in the country, phosphorus and nitrogen, they behave very differently in the landscape. And I suppose by examining and understanding, I suppose, the landscape, we can predict what we're likely to see and what issue is likely to be driving status in a particular catchment. So by using the aquifer and soils maps that are available from GSI and other sources, we can see, for example, we can see where the poorly productive aquifers and heavy soils are, and these are the areas where surface water runoff and overland flow pathways are likely to dominate, and in turn these are the areas that we're likely to see phosphorus in excess, and where phosphorus may be a concern. And also, I suppose, in turn, looking at well-drained areas dominated by those productive aquifers and well-drained, free-draining soils are the areas where we're more likely to see nitrate occurring. So this is, I suppose, the aim of this is to continually fine-tune our understanding of the catchment, and particularly of where the problems are occurring, and what problems are occurring, and again, where they are occurring in particular. So then the final stage maybe of that assessment in the DESC study is to look at the pressures and to look at the activities in a catchment that could be a potential source. So we call them the pressures. So the Environmental Protection Agency have developed a number of risk tools that integrate both the pathway and source information. So what we're seeing here is what we call the pip maps. So that one there on the right is a pip map for phosphorus. So what it shows, is where there's the highest risk of phosphorus loss due to stocking rates and also to the geological conditions that we described earlier. And there's a similar map for domestic wastewater treatment and septic tanks, based on the same principles. But I suppose what we have to remember here, and something we're constantly reminding ourselves, that these risk maps are very useful, and they're a great guide to help inform and also to guide fieldwork. But risk doesn't equal impact. So just because there's a risk of impact occurring, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is occurring. So, so the fieldwork is needed to confirm what impact is actually occurring. We can also then examine in detail the pressures. There's a lot of information about particular pressures that are going on in catchments. So this is an example here from Tipperary, from the Dead River, actually, in Tipperary, near Tipperary town. It's Limerick Junction. And it's an example of a wastewater treatment plant. So the red star in the picture there is the location of the wastewater treatment plant. And the yellow at the top of that catchment, that water body, is the monitoring point. So that's effectively the compliance point for that water body. And we know that phosphorus is in excess in this catchment. We know that the phosphorus level here, it exceeds the environmental quality standard for good status by over double what it should be. So we know that the load reduction that's needed in this catchment, we know that it's a significant load reduction in the order of about 1,600 kilograms of phosphorus per year. But we know as well from the data that's available that the wastewater treatment plant here contributes about 240 of those kilograms per year. So it's that allows us to, I suppose, to assess the relative proportion and I suppose the relative contribution of the different pressures in the catchments. So from that we can tell that the wastewater treatment plant alone there is not, that's not the only pressure, that there are other issues going on in that catchment and that they will need to be addressed. That looking at the wastewater treatment plant on its own isn't going to solve the problem in that catchment. So and the point sources, we have a lot of information on point sources that can allow us to make this kind of an assessment at DESC study stage. But also, we also need to validate this when we go out on the ground, because when we go out, very often what we might find with a point source that maybe particularly maybe wastewater treatment plants, that maybe it's overflows or other aspects of the plant that could be causing a problem, or if they're very close to the wastewater treatment plant or there's some shock loadings, they can also be significant. So I suppose ultimately the purpose of the DESC study is to build a picture and tell a story of what's happening, and also to design. It allows us to design a fieldwork program that that targets the particular areas where we expect to see impact based on what we see. So the next stage of the process is a community meeting, and again, this is a very important part of the process. It allows us to share the information and tell people about the program. These series of photographs here are actually from the first meeting that we ever held, the first public meeting. It was for the Athy area in Athy, and I remember there was a lot of I suppose concern at the time from maybe the program was new, and the whole initiative was new, and there was a lot of concern from some from the agricultural community in particular about cross compliance and inspections, and there was a small bit of fear. So the meeting gave us an opportunity to explain the whole process, to explain the programme, and to explain that the ASAP service is a free and confidential one. It's not linked to inspections or compliance, and that the aim here is to secure improvements by voluntary measures. And it really helped to allay people's fears, I think, at the time. These meetings actually have been a victim of COVID, and obviously we can't do these community meetings at the moment. So we had our first Zoom community meeting actually on Wednesday night for the Johns River in Waterford. Definitely, I think, a sign of the times. So another part of the process is the farmers' meetings. So this meeting is hosted by the ASAP advisors, and the Department of Agriculture have contacted all landowners in areas to invite them to this meeting. And again, it's another opportunity to explain the programme. We usually hold the farmer meeting on the side of the river like this. We'll generally have done a kick sample and bring it as well, bring a tray of invertebrates, and it's it's a very useful tool to kind of get people talking and explain the purpose of the programme. So I suppose at that stage then we're ready to go out in the field and start doing field work. So this here is a picture of my colleague Cormac in Galway, and Cormac is looking here into a tray of invertebrates, trying to see what's here. We have a number of different fieldwork techniques or tools that we use to gather information to gather information about where the river is impacted. So the SSIS, the Small Stream Impact Score, is one. So that's looking at the invertebrates, the bugs basically that live in the bed of the river, and as people probably know, these are a really good indicator of water quality. We also look, at the likes of macroalgae, macrophytes, and also the physical condition of the river. I suppose vegetation that grows in the river is no different to the vegetation growing anywhere, and it's going to respond to nutrient. So again, these are really good signs and really good indicators to show where impacts are occurring. And also, I suppose, because we don't always have the luxury maybe of long-term monitoring programs, so we are very much reliant on these particularly the biological indicators as well as chemistry. But particularly the biological indicators can give us a good snapshot of how the condition of the river is and has been for a period of time. A picture there of the I suppose of the river and the physical condition of the river, and it's a stretch that looks like it's been channelized to some extent, and it doesn't have its original natural form. So and again, that information is recorded and captured. So here again, I suppose an example of what we see in fieldwork, and this is actually the same stretch of river and photographed over a period of actually only 12 months. So, and I suppose it's a good example of the issues that we're seeing in particular catchments, and also of the importance of the desk study, and also the importance of validating that with fieldwork. So this is a catchment where, based on the information available, we would have expected to see a nutrient problem, in particular nitrate in this catchment. But when catchment scientists went out, it was obvious that sediment actually was a particular problem in this catchment. It was I suppose really impeding the biological potential of the river, and we weren't seeing the kind of diversity that we would need for a good status site. So this is kind of, I suppose, typical of the practices in this area, where this is the river channel, and it's maintained and cleared regularly throughout, I suppose, over a number of years. And I suppose the photograph on the middle photograph shows the work in progress. And while that work was going on, there would have been a huge amount of sediment probably released into the river, and it would have moved downstream. And that sediment is a significant stressor, and it's a significant problem and can, I suppose, really reduce the status. But the photograph on the right then is 12 months later, and it shows, I suppose, that immediate risk from sediment has gone. The vegetation has has returned and has, I suppose, stabilised effectively that loose sediment. But I suppose one of the questions that we have is, is it sustainable, and can this be sustained? And, is that landowner likely to want to maybe go back in there again in a few years' time to clear it again, and the problem and the reason why it was cleared in the first instance may still be there, whether, so, there's a long-term strategy needed for these kind of rivers, and, I suppose guidance as well for people on maintaining them, so that, that perhaps that it's done in stages and that not all of it will be done at the same time, so that you can control and limit the level of impact. Another, I suppose, just a couple of final slides here now on fieldwork. And again, this is an example from one of my colleagues in the Midlands and East team. And again, just maybe a stretch. It's a water body where they, during summer fieldwork, identified that sediment again was a significant issue. And it was an area then that they targeted for assessment during the winter months and during heavy rainfall to identify, I suppose, critical source areas, to see areas where water and sediment was being lost from the landscape. So, with a bit of good planning and weather watching, I suppose they were out following rainfall, and they could see and were able to identify, the locations and I suppose the low points in the landscape and the weak vulnerable points where there's no buffer margins and where those losses are occurring. And these are the critical source areas for sediment in this area. And I suppose in this instance, what's required here is measures to break pathways and prevent these kind of losses from occurring. And largely riparian buffers would go a long way here. So at the end of field work, I suppose what the catchment scientists then have to do is to work out and establish what measures are required to address the issues that we're seeing, and these are the referrals. So the referral is essentially it describes the actions or measures that are required to be implemented, and the issues that need to be and the issues that need to be addressed. So they're very much informed by the conceptual understanding that's been established at the desk study, and also supported by the evidence that has been gathered during fieldwork. They're agreed with the implementing body, and where that activity is agriculture, the referral is agreed with the relevant ASAP advisor. The advisor then will go and meet farmers in those particular areas and do a very detailed farm assessment with that farmer. And I suppose at that stage then, that's an opportunity for the advisor to get a very good understanding of the kind of enterprise and farm operation that's going on, and also to understand, I suppose, what are the weak points and maybe the vulnerabilities of that activity and of the practice that might be there. Is it, I suppose, where the vulnerabilities are, whether there's sufficient storage, whether it's a farm that, I suppose maybe is continually under pressure to get out early with slurry in the season, at the very end of the close season. So, these are all of the kind of information that the advisor can will I suppose get from the farmer during that farm assessment, and using the knowledge that they have then from the field work that we've done and from the referral here, they'll be able to identify what particular I suppose aspects of that farm operation are the ones that are contributing to the water quality issues in the catchment, and that then they will, with that farmer, design the specific measures that are required on that farm and that need to be implemented. So those measures are agreed individually for each of those farms. And I suppose where the farmer doesn't necessarily agree or maybe can't implement a particular measure, that information is also captured by the advisor, because I suppose it's critically important that we understand where those, I suppose, what are those barriers to implementation as well, and to securing the kind of measures that are necessary, and that kind of information will inform, I suppose, the review of implementation and the review of the success of the programme as well, and also policy in future.
Ruth, if I could ask you to maybe
finish up
your finishing slides, because we can use for time and questions.
Of course, Mark. Sorry, now I'm actually nearly there, and I'll slide through this.
Thank you.
So, progress so far, I won't delay here too long. We've started in nearly all of the areas that were I suppose, priority areas. We have our field work has been restricted by COVID-19, and I suppose we will be carrying on maybe a lot of the work into the third cycle as well, and I suppose there will be another round of or another series of areas selected and identified for the third cycle, and they will be published. I understand that they will be published and detailed in the draft River Basin Management Plan, which is due out at the end of the year. So finally, I suppose, yeah, we have made a great start, and the early signs are positive, I think, and we are seeing water quality improvements in these priority areas. And while many of these improvements might have occurred before, I suppose, LAWPRO started and would have resulted from actions that started prior to us, one of the main positives that I see in the programme is the very high level of engagement that we're seeing and participation that we're seeing from all of the stakeholders. And I think that there's definitely an appetite for this kind of a support and collaborative kind of approach. I suppose there were many challenges as well, and it's important that we monitor the effectiveness of the measures that are being implemented so that we can, evolve and adapt and improve the measures as well where we need to. I suppose we also need to expand the toolkit of measures that we have and we have access to, and particularly maybe in the area of nitrate, the trend there is particularly challenging. There are opportunities too, and we need to be mindful of those, and I suppose to secure as well measures that are going to, I suppose, result in multiple benefits, particularly in the area of climate change and biodiversity. So I suppose, as the saying goes, there's a lot done and a lot more to do. So I think I'll finish at that, Mark, and hand back to you, and thank you to everybody for listening.
Ruth, thanks so much for that. That's an excellent presentation, and you've teed up next week's talk very nicely, where we'll be talking to Noel Meehan and Joe Crockett about the ASAP program. We're getting lots of questions in here, so we're just. I mean, I suppose my immediate question, you mentioned at the end that there's been generally a positive reaction among stakeholders. I mean, is that across the board, would you say, Ruth, that, how has the reaction been amongst farmers and stakeholders to the programme?
I think generally it is very positive, and I think, I suppose everybody, farmers in particular, they do see the need, that I suppose farming, that they need to be able to demonstrate, and that as a country we need to be able to demonstrate that our farm practices are sustainable, and that they're not, that they're not having a detrimental impact on the environment. And I don't think anybody, intends or, wants to cause damage, or wants to cause impact. So, for the most part, people are entirely supportive of the programme, and, and are also willing to find out what can they do and what measure can they implement. Definitely there are challenges for farmers as well, and one of the frequent questions is about supports and grants, perhaps to help them maybe put some of the measures in place. So there are definitely challenges there too.
You showed a slide there where a farmer, I presume, or landowner, did some drainage work on a cleaning a drain, and there was sediment issues as a result of that. What would be the ideal situation there if you were, if that farmer, for instance, or landowner, had come to you and said, "Look, we're looking at doing some drainage work here." What sort of advice would you have given them in that case?
Yeah, this is, I suppose this is a particularly challenging area, and it's one that I know the department are looking at as well, and looking at I suppose maybe developing, and maybe fine-tuning the guidance that's already there to ensure, that we are mitigating and managing the risks associated with this kind of practice. But for the most part, I suppose what, we've been looking at and advising people do, and also I suppose looking at the fisheries. Fisheries have guidance in this area because, for river channels, it can have a significant impact on fish life and aquatic life. But for the most part, I suppose what we would ask people to do is to minimise the level of I suppose sediment that's going to be released and mobilised. And it could involve maybe not doing all of the sections at once, or doing it in stages to, so that you're not releasing vast amounts of sediment. But yeah, it is a particularly challenging one, and particularly in areas where I suppose this practice has gone on for quite, for generations probably, and it can be a difficult one to get change.
As I see a few questions coming through on the reporting of water quality and
Yeah.
the LiDAR.
And a couple of, I suppose one of the questions that's come through are will the assessments that are being carried out be publicly available for people to see?
Yeah, that's, yeah, I mean, I suppose LAWPRO, we do intend to publish information on the progress and measures that are implemented. And I suppose what we'll be doing is making that available at a water body scale. So, you know, I suppose there is maybe privacy issues around individual areas, and also I suppose the fact that the ASAP program, one of the central tenets of it is that it is, you know, it's a free and confidential service that is being provided to farmers. So for the most part, the information that we're going to provide will be at a water body scale. And it's, I suppose we haven't, it's not necessarily available yet, and we are currently, I suppose, redesigning our website, but it would be made available there. And I suppose we do recognise that this kind of feedback and information back to communities, it is a critically important part of the process and of the cycle, and it's a priority for us to be able to deliver that.
And I suppose a related question in relation to, I suppose, the assessment of the impacts. Are you planning, or have you started the process of going back into the catchments where work has been ongoing to monitor what changes are happening? And there was another question in relation to the water quality sampling in those areas, and how is that being managed to assess ongoing water quality?
Yeah, I suppose in the first instance, I suppose the Water Framework Directive Monitoring Programme is, you know, it's ongoing all of the time. So, you know, that is there, and that will, I suppose, hopefully, record improvements in time. But we do know that it would be important to go back as well and to measure and to, I suppose, to look specifically maybe at the areas that we know have been impacted and to see, are we seeing improvement there. But I suppose in the first instance, before we would even do that, you know, it's important to capture the information on the measures that are being implemented, you know, through farm visits and revisiting those farms as well to ensure that the measures have been implemented. And, you know, there's a little bit of, I suppose, a lag time sometimes in those, you know, that measures can maybe not always implemented in the first year, and it could take a second year. But yes, we are currently designing a program to go back and to assess the effectiveness, I suppose, of the program overall, and to see and confirm where measures are working, and then also to show as well where they're not working and where they need, you know, I suppose maybe either a better understanding or a different measure, or what we thought initially isn't, you know, I suppose maybe needs to, I suppose, further assessment.
Okay, there's a couple of questions in relation to the identification of critical source areas at farm level. What is being done in terms of identifying these areas, and is there any possibility of the use of LiDAR to assist this process? Yeah,
there's, I suppose we're fortunate to benefit from, I suppose, a lot of the research projects that are going on at the moment as well, and there is specifically a research project that the EPA and others are involved in at the moment, and it is specifically looking at critical source areas and identifying those in the landscape. So, and they're producing a set of tools that are based on the likes of LiDAR and other inputs. So we will be, I suppose, using those and taking those and developing them further. I understand that project is going to deliver shortly, and we will be examining those closer. So yeah, I suppose any tool that will help with that process will be really valuable, because it'll help pinpoint and narrow down the area where measures need to be implemented, and it'll assist the design of those measures as well, and the effectiveness of them.
Okay, you mentioned during the talk about you showed maps in relation to septic tanks. What supports are available for people with septic tanks to deal with issues that they might have?
Yeah, thanks actually, Pat, for that. I forgot to mention the septic tank grant scheme. It is one of the other measures that's detailed in the River Basin Management Plan, and the last government actually announced details of the extension of the existing septic tank grant scheme there last month. So the extension applies to people with septic tanks in high status objective water body areas. So in those areas, people with a faulty septic tank and a septic tank that's causing a problem can apply for a grant to get it remedied. And also there's another grant scheme for people with septic tanks in priority areas for action. And so where we, the catchment assessment team, where we identify septic tanks that are a risk to the environment in our field work and in our assessment work, where we identify those septic tanks as potentially problematic, we will be notifying those householders and property owners of their potential eligibility for that grant scheme, and that then they can get their septic tank assessed and identify what improvements need to be done to it, and they will be potentially eligible for that grant. So that's a great initiative in those areas, and it will definitely help householders. Previous grant schemes were means tested, so this one isn't going to be means tested.
Ruth, I was looking at the program for government there the other day. I see specific reference to the ASAP program and many measures relating to water quality. We're coming up to a review of the Common Agricultural Policy, and new environmental schemes will be attached to that. Are there particular measures that you'd like to see coming down the tracks in those future schemes, be it eco schemes or agri-environmental schemes, to tackle the issues that you've outlined?
Yeah. I suppose definitely we would like to see, I suppose a lot of, I think there's lots of room for improvement, or lots of room for maybe tweaking some of those schemes. And I think definitely some of the results-based schemes have been really positive. And I suppose one of the great things about them is that they're focused on outcomes other than I suppose just productivity, maybe in agricultural productivity, and they also put a value on I suppose other aspects of the farm practice, whether it's biodiversity and management, and so I think those kind of schemes to support those kind of initiatives are really positive. I think I suppose there's many other pressures that we're dealing with that maybe I suppose maybe aren't fully I suppose supported at the moment. Looking at nitrate as well, and specific measures to try and tackle catchments where we're seeing nitrate, those free draining areas. That's going to be a particularly challenging one, definitely, and looking at drainage as well. Those are ones as well. So yeah, there's I could go on.
Okay, thanks for that, Ruth.
I suppose a couple of issues coming up around the community meetings, and alluding to the fact that a community involvement can have or a community action can have an impact on water quality where a community get together. Is there any plans for follow-up meetings or activities at community level to try and deal with issues?
Yeah, I suppose if you're referring to maybe particular community projects, maybe the communities would lead, and whether they would have an impact themselves. And this is, I suppose, definitely a concern. And that I suppose well-intentioned groups may, that there can be maybe unintended consequences of projects or works that can be carried out. So we would always advise the community groups that are working in I suppose, or intend to do something around the river, that they would contact the local community water officer, and the community water officer then can liaise and provide really good guidance on the kind of the kind of risks that might be, and also guide them towards sources of information and advice with fisheries or parks and wildlife, and how to best design and manage projects to get the maximum benefit, but also to kind of get those other co-benefits, to look at trying to manage water maybe, and look at biodiversity and improving that in particular areas. So definitely I would say contact the community water officer for advice on any of those projects.
There's a couple of questions in relation to, I suppose, works around rivers and the management of them. And is there any support available, or any prospect of support available to farmers and landowners to implement best practice in this area, or is this something that needs to be looked at?
Yeah, there is, and I suppose a lot of the European innovation projects, the EIPs that the Department of Agriculture are supporting, I suppose, are just that, and that they are, that they're focused on maybe particular aspects or particular local interests, be they maybe protective, sensitive habitats, and I suppose they are supporting the development of those best practice measures and funding them, and I suppose they're very valuable to the country as a whole, even beyond the area that they're particularly focused in, because they can provide that kind of guidance on best practice, and they can maybe trial it at a local scale, and it's something that we can take and learn from as well.
And are you, question there, are you working with OPW in terms of some of the management of where the OPW have management in hand of some of these water courses?
Yeah, absolutely, and I suppose it's definitely is one of the big pressures on water quality in areas is maintained drainage, maintained river channels for flood relief purposes. So I suppose we would look at that, but I suppose that's also an issue at national level, that the Environmental Protection Agency and the department would be engaging OPW with. These are it's generally termed the hydromorphological challenges, or the hydromorphology of the river, which is, the physical condition. And very often, I suppose, rivers that have been significantly altered away from their natural condition, that it is very difficult to achieve good status. And it's very difficult for those kind of rivers to support maybe the natural kind of habitat that would normally be expected in good status waters. So that's, I suppose, part of a wider discussion as well around those kind of hydromorphological challenges and achieving good status in those waters. And it's definitely a very significant conversation that's going on.
Just, I suppose, from my perspective, your hopes for the future in relation to, I know maybe putting you on the spot a little bit here in terms of continuation or the implementation of some of the lessons you have learned over the last year to 2 years, things that you might need to do or redesign. Any thoughts? Not putting you on the spot a little bit, I know.
You are, Pat. I suppose one of the big learnings for me, and I suppose one of the big I suppose positives really that I'm taking, that I take away, and I think it's something that we need to continually support, is the collaboration. I think, I suppose a huge amount of effort, and I think it's impossible to understate that the level of effort that has gone into developing the relationships across agencies and across the different sectors between, I suppose, agricultural research, the state agencies, like the Environmental Protection Agencies and local authorities. So the level of cooperation and interaction that's going on there is massive. And I think and through the regional operational committee structures as well. And I think that by, I suppose those groups and those people coming together and those agencies, I suppose, and understanding maybe each other's perspective of the river. Everybody has, their own job to do and is very much focused on that. But through those structures, we can kind of develop a shared understanding as well, and I suppose maybe appreciate where one activity and one it can be impacting elsewhere, and that maybe with modification that it can be improved. So I think for me, the effort that is involved in those collaborative processes, I think that needs to be maintained and continued and supported, and I have no doubt that it will be. And also I think the public consultation and engagement parts of the Water Framework Directive as well, the engagements with the communities, I think that's also critically important. And and again, I suppose I'd encourage everybody at any level to participate in those public consultation processes. I know the department have extended the public consultation on SWIMI, the Significant Water Management Issues paper. And again, that's looking at the issues that are going to inform the River Basin Management Plan, and that draft plan will be published at the end of the year and will be out for public consultation next year. So again, I suppose I'd encourage everybody, whether it's members of the public or agencies, to participate in those consultation processes, that they are critically important, really.
Okay, Sinead, Ruth, beg your pardon. Ruth, thank you very much for your presentation today. We're out of time, unfortunately. We're slightly over time, in fact. And look, I want to congratulate you and the LAWPRO team on really, getting this program up and running. And there's no doubt about it that there is strength in unity, and it's a great example of collaboration between various state agencies and groups across the country. So well done on that. I want to thank our production team for today, Pat Murphy, Yvonne Maher, Noel Meehan, who we'll be hearing from next week, along with Joe Crockett on the ASSET programme, and also Andy Boland. Want to thank Andy for his support in this series. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Teagasc YouTube channel in the next number of days, and Ruth's presentation will be available also on the Teagasc website. So until next week, stay safe, and we look forward to bringing you lots more webinars over the next number of months. We'll be going through August, and you can see the full schedule available on the Teagasc website as well under webinars. If you go to the Teagasc homepage, and up on the top right hand corner, you'll see a link for webinars. So thank you again, Ruth and Pat, and we will talk to you all next week again.
You've been listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost series, the weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Don't forget to join us live every Friday morning for our latest webinar. For more, visit teagasc.ie. And you can also rate, review, and subscribe to the Signpost series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Mark Gibson, and thanks for listening.